Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. It is good to have you here with us. President Donald Trump signs the first pro-life law in 14 years, allowing states to defund Planned Parenthood. The legislation lets states deny federal family planning dollars to Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers. It erases a rule finalized shortly before former President Barack Obama left office, preventing states from blocking the money. Pro-lifers say these dollars can now go to life-affirming clinics, and it allows states to decide what is best for them. Mallory Quigley is Communications Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Mallory, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Catherine.
Put this into context for us. How much money was going to Planned Parenthood and abortion providers at a state level through Title X funding?
Sure. So we know from the Government Accountability Office that Title X makes up about $60 million worth of Planned Parenthood's taxpayer funding. It's the second largest funding stream that they have coming in from taxpayers. So this isn't the largest source of funding, and for a while now, states have already been working to prioritize funding away from Planned Parenthood and to the pro-life alternatives. So it's unclear exactly how much money is going to be impacted, but as much as $60 million.
And you said the second largest provider of that's incredible. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, was with President Trump at this law signing.
Yeah.
What does she make of its significance?
Well, it was really incredible to see pro-life women be surrounded by the president, including my boss, for the signing of this bill. This was the president's first opportunity to sign a pro-life bill into law, and the fact that he had women gathered around him, including the bill's sponsor, Congresswoman Diane Black, and others, I think it's really reflective of the fact that women are the leaders of the pro-life movement. Women do support real comprehensive health care for women, not Planned Parenthood. So it was very reflective and I think monumental. It shows how the pro-life movement has grown. I mean, for 8 years, we did not have a presence at the White House. Reporters asked me this last week. They were like, well, when was the last time? Like, did you work with the Obama administration? And I was kind of shocked by the question because, of course, we didn't. We weren't welcome there. So to have pro-life women in the Oval Office with the president alongside him as he signs this historic bill was very encouraging for the movement.
Seems like there are frequent visits to the White House these days. This is a pro-life law, but it also deals with states' rights. Can you talk to us about that aspect?
Sure. So the regulation that the Obama administration put in place on their way out the door was essentially to force states to fund Planned Parenthood through their Title X, with their Title X grants that of course come from the federal government. And now there's no mandate in the Constitution that states need to fund Planned Parenthood. They should have a right to prioritize funding where they think that is best for their residents. And I think that the states really are poised to make these choices.
And there really are pro-life states really are out there too.
To name a few, Tennessee and New Jersey have long worked to defund Planned Parenthood and to concentrate on the alternatives. That's why I think this was so close to Congressman Black's heart, because she's been such a great leader in her own state, getting them to prioritize funding for community health centers.
Mallory, what's next? Now that this has been done, what's the focus of the pro-life movement?
Well, I mentioned that Title X is only Planned Parenthood's second largest funding stream. They are still getting more than $400 million a year. That's $1.5 million a day through Medicaid. And so that's the eye on the prize. We got to keep our eye on it as we work to reprioritize that funding through pro-life healthcare reform. Now, Republicans are unified on this issue of redirecting Planned Parenthood's funding, but it's been caught up in gridlock as they've struggled and wrestled with the rest of that healthcare reform bill. So that's where we need to focus next to take down that funding. It would really revolutionize women's health to send that to the community health centers that outnumber Planned Parenthood 20-1.
Thank you for being here, for keeping us informed. Mallory Quigley of the Susan B. Anthony List. For this week's call to action, we are calling on Congress to defund Planned Parenthood. While states can now defund the abortion business, money is still pouring in at the federal level. Here is how you can make your pro-life voice heard to our U.S. lawmakers. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. Tell Congress to defund Planned Parenthood and make Medicaid dollars available to pro-life community health centers. Planned Parenthood receives nearly $500 million a year from the U.S. government. If you do not want your tax dollars to go to the largest abortion provider in the U.S. and want the money to be redirected to life-affirming health care, follow this week's call to action. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. By filling out a simple form and giving a few clicks, you can make a difference in the pro-life movement. On the topic of defunding, the Trump administration cut off U.S. dollars to the United Nations Population Fund earlier this month. The administration claims the agency supports population control programs in China, including coercive abortion. The UN group will lose at least $32.5 million in this year's budget. Archbishop Bernardito Auza is Pope Francis's representative at the United Nations. He joins us now from New York City. Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
What do you make of the U.S. withholding millions of dollars from the UN Population Fund?
Well, I believe, I'm sure that the United States made that decision, not because it doesn't want to support women's health and girls' health, but because according to the letter of the State Department to Senator Corker, the UNFPA supports and collaborates in programs that include coercive abortion or involuntary sterilization, which is against the policy of the administration. So on the one hand, it is significant in the sense that the United States, concretely it's significant. The United States is the fourth biggest donor to the UNFPA. On the other hand, even with the withdrawal of the United States support, the other big donors of the UNFPA have picked up the tab. And so in the concrete, the UNFPA would have the same funding, although the funding comes from other donor countries. So in that sense, politically, it sent a very strong message, as well as also it signaled a departure of the policy of the previous administration.
Considering what you mentioned about coercive abortion and sterilization, do you support the U.S. decision?
Well, if it is what they say, certainly everyone should support that, even those who are big supporters of the UNFPA. Nobody could ever accept coercive abortion nor involuntary sterilization. They are condemned, not only by our conscience, by our moral principles, but also by international laws and conventions. So we completely agree. If this was the reason for the withdrawal, for the cutting, the stopping of the funding, then I don't think anybody could be against it.
Your Excellency, the UN has a list of sustainable development goals, including one about increasing access to sexual and reproductive health care services. What does the UN mean by that language, and what is the Vatican stance on that goal?
There has been a kind of a misinterpretation of the Holy See support of the Sustainable Development Goals, even criticizing the Holy Father. But I think we would like to ask those people to look at all our reservations on the Sustainable Development Goals. The overall assessment, the assessment of the Holy See, overall, the whole vision of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is, as the Holy Father said, hopeful and in a big sense positive, But we have indeed made very explicit reservations, and on these targets that you have just mentioned, where these terms are being mentioned, and we have made our reservations clear. We have published that in many parts, and we have expressed that immediately after the vote as an explanation of our reservation. And it is public. It is on our website, and it was also it has been sent also to all the Episcopal conferences in the world. But of course, it has not prevented some countries and some UN agencies from using these terms and expressions to also interpret as including abortion. That is our biggest reservation there. Even though the Sustainable Development Goals overall, I mean, is positive. You know, it's about, you know, cleaning environment, sustainable cities, global partnerships, peaceful institutions, etc. These are certain terms in which we have made explicit reservations or contrary opinions.
Archbishop Bernardito Auza, Pope Francis's representative at the United Nations, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Turning to more life news, in a series of court decisions, Arkansas is forced to stop a wave of executions scheduled to start this week. Arkansas planned to resume capital punishment for 8 inmates in 10 days. Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson defends the aggressive schedule as necessary because the state supply of a key lethal injection drug expires at the end of April. The Diocese of Little Rock's Bishop Anthony Taylor calls for continued prayers for the abolition of the death penalty. In Tennessee, a federal judge halts the enforcement of 2 pro-life laws. One of the laws requires abortion providers have hospital admitting privileges. The other requires abortion clinics meet hospital-level surgical standards. The state attorney general's office says it will continue to defend the abortion counseling requirement and a 48-hour waiting period for women seeking abortions. The halting order came down on Good Friday. Indiana's Senate sends Governor Eric Holcomb a pro-life measure protecting more minors from getting an abortion. The bill requires a judge to consider notifying parents of a minor seeking an abortion. It tasks abortion clinics with verifying the ID of an adult giving the permission, and it adjusts reporting requirements. Indiana Right to Life says this bill protects minor girls, increases parental rights, and helps sex trafficking victims. A UK judge rules doctors can pool life support from a baby without the parent's consent. Baby Charlie Gard has a rare disease. He's fed through a tube, breathes with an artificial ventilator, and is unable to move. His parents want to keep the 8-month-old on life support to bring him to the U.S. for an experimental treatment. But last week, a high court judge in the UK ruled it was in the baby's best interest for doctors to withdraw support from Charlie and place him strictly on palliative care. BBC reports Charlie's father shouted no and burst into tears upon hearing the court ruling. The baby's parents are considering an appeal. A Swedish court rules against a midwife who refused to perform abortions. Eleanor Grimart claims she was discriminated against and denied jobs because of her pro-life stance. Sweden's labor court said last week it found no cause her freedom of opinion and expression had been violated. Grimart is considering taking her case to the European Court of Human Rights. This case is not the only one where religious liberty and pro-life issues intersect in the courtroom or in the hospital. To further examine the role religious liberty plays in being pro-life, we are joined by tonight's expert panel. Lewis Brown serves at the Christ Medicus Foundation, and Kelly Fedoric serves as legal counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. Thank you both for being here.
Sure. Thanks, Catherine, for having us.
So first off, what is your reaction to this Swedish court ruling? What is this signal to pro-lifers?
Well, it's really unthinkable that the government is trying to make as a condition of employment of the medical professional's willingness to perform an abortion. I mean, this poor woman, Eleanor, she's been 3 times denied a job simply because she wants to protect life. But I think really this is more symptomatic of a much larger problem that we're seeing across not only Europe, but here in the United States, where healthcare providers are no longer able to uphold the Hippocratic oath they take to do no harm. And I think the bottom line is, will those medical professionals, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, will they be able to go into the profession and stay in there and save lives? Or will they be forced by the government to leave the profession because they can't violate their conscience and end a life?
Right, and Catherine, what you're seeing is the danger of where we could go in the United States if we fail to protect the right of conscience, the right of religious freedom in healthcare. You're no longer talking about whether abortion should be legal or not, but we're now saying the government is going to potentially in the United States, if we don't protect conscience, compel folks in the medical profession, hospitals, healthcare providers to actually do abortions, or you can't be in the profession whatsoever, and that's not a place where we want to go as Americans.
This isn't just an issue that's abroad, like
Right.
you mentioned. And Kelly, your group is working on a case in California that deals with religious liberty in healthcare. Can you talk about that?
That's right. Well, in 2015, California passed a law that essentially forces pregnancy resource centers to become essentially a free advertising agency for the abortion industry. It forces them to promote abortion and also to post signs in their windows telling women where they can go to get an abortion, including places like Planned Parenthood. But this violates these pregnancy care centers, violates their First Amendment freedom, their freedom to be able to speak freely, speak a message consistent with their conscience. And so we've appealed the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court, asking them to preserve these pregnancy resource centers who are really just trying to serve women, bring them hope, bring them free services, bring them free diapers, trying to protect them so that they're not punished for their pro-life views.
And Louis, your group, the Christ Medicus Foundation, was created in part to protect religious freedom in our healthcare. Why is this something that Catholics and pro-lifers need to seriously consider?
Sure. If we don't protect the right of conscience in healthcare, we can't have a culture of life in the United States of America. If we don't protect the right of conscience in healthcare, we really can't be who we are as Americans. If we really want the best quality medical system in the world, we have to have one that is free, which means we have to have one that is based on the patient, based on the person, the decision between the physician and the patient. If we have the government stepping in, compelling physicians to perform certain procedures, compelling physicians to do things that are not consistent with what they believe they ought to do, what's best for the patient, what's consistent with their conscience, we can't have a free healthcare system. We can't have a quality healthcare system. We can't have one that's based on the patient. It would be based on the government. And so we don't want to see that. We want to see an American healthcare system where folks have access to care, but where doctors and patients are making that decision consistent with their conscience, consistent with their religious freedom.
Kelly, the Supreme Court case Zubik versus Burwell was sent back down to the lower courts. It dealt with whether religious nonprofits are required to provide contraception to their employees. You represent clients involved in this case. What's the latest?
Well, the cases are still pending down in the lower courts, and we're hopeful that the Trump administration will soon issue new regulations that protect these colleges, these universities, and nonprofits, including Little Sisters of the Poor, will protect their freedom to provide employee healthcare coverage that's consistent with their conscience, and as Louis was saying, that doesn't force them to violate the very convictions that inspire them to serve.
Louis, you sat down recently with President Trump along with other healthcare leaders. What was your message to our president, and how did he respond?
My message to the president was the importance of protecting the right of conscience when it comes to taxpayers, so that they're not forced to be paying for the public funding of abortion and health care. And he was very receptive to that. He's very supportive of prohibiting the public funding of abortion in health care. I find him to be receptive of it. And he's also very receptive and very supportive, along with Secretary Price, both of them together, very supportive of having an American health care system that's based on the patient, not the government at the center. And part of what we saw in the last administration was the government being at the center of healthcare, saying, essentially, we want to subsidize the public funding of abortion, which violates the conscience of all of us as tax-paying Americans.
Kelly, what is your hope from the Trump administration when it comes to religious liberty and life-affirming healthcare?
Well, he's talked about all these threats, so it's really no surprise that the Trump administration, or President Trump, during his campaign was very clear that one of his first priorities was going to be to protect religious freedom. And we've seen a leaked draft, and our hope is that he will sign that executive order, that he will protect the freedom of all Americans to live consistent with their core convictions. I mean, this is our heritage, this is who we are as Americans, and so it's only common sense that he would sign this executive order and also encourage his agencies to repeal and rescind some of the regulations that really thwarted and infringed upon some of our most fundamental First Amendment freedoms, that he'll stand for the freedom of all Americans and restore balance and tolerance to the people living in this great country.
Louis, you are calling on Congress to put conscience protection into our health care. What exactly are you hoping to see, and do you think it's likely?
Sure. There's two things. The first is the Conscience Protection Act, which would effectively protect medical providers, doctors, physicians, healthcare entities from being coerced by the local or the federal government into any way participating in an abortion, facilitating it, funding it, operating it, doing it. But we also, more long-term, want to see a federal law that says folks that have a moral or religious objection to doing some type of practice or procedure are free to not do that. They're protected if they refuse to do a certain procedure that violates their faith, that violates their conscience. And we know that conscience is the first freedom. If we don't protect the right to believe, the right to do what we believe we ought to do, we can't have a democracy. And so that's why it's so fundamentally important.
This is something we'll continue to follow closely here. Callie Fedoruk, Lewis Brown, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
When we come back, one journalist who covered the abortionist Kermit Gosnell's court case explains why he now believes pro-lifers speak the truth. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. There is life. We will be resurrection men and women of life. Pope Francis calling us to be people of life as we continue to celebrate Easter. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner. The Speak Out segment is a chance to examine how pervasive the abortion industry's messaging permeates throughout our culture. In a recent announcement from Planned Parenthood, that abortion Hollywood connection could not be made more blatantly obvious. Shonda Rhimes, the woman behind ABC shows Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, and How to Get Away with Murder, is joining Planned Parenthood's national board. In an interview with Elle magazine, Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards and Rhimes praised each other's work. Richards says she wants to tap into Rhimes' storytelling ability and creative energy. You may remember it was on Rhimes' show Scandal that character Olivia Pope underwent an abortion while the hymn Silent Night played in the background. Following the abortion scene, she went to the White House, sipped wine as the song Ave Maria played. Two songs created to celebrate Mary's yes and bringing our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into the world were twisted to play into the abortion agenda, the opposite of yes, the denial of life, and the mockery of Our Lady. Now that Rhimes is joining Planned Parenthood, we can expect to see more hour-long commercials for the abortion giant on mainstream television. This further points to evidence that abortion advocates have the media in their back pocket, and it's another reminder pro-lifers need to be on the lookout for abortion messaging weaved into television scripts. Shonda, for someone who advocates for women, what about using your platform to tell stories about women saying yes to life in adversity, women who work hard to support the child with whom they've been blessed? I know you're the producer behind How to Get Away with Murder, but that doesn't mean you should help Planned Parenthood to do just that. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death by following this week's call to action. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. Tell Congress to defund Planned Parenthood and send Medicaid dollars to life-affirming health centers instead. Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell is serving life in prison for first-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. It was a heinous case that barely saw national media attention. But for one journalist, covering the case was the unexpected start of a pro-life journey.
Fela McAleer is an Irish journalist and filmmaker who's covered topics ranging from finance to fracking.
You think it's appropriate to...
Okay, that's it. He's a roving reporter even on vacation, which is why a few years back, McAleer decided to pop into a Philadelphia court case during time off. The case involved abortionist Kermit Gosnell, who was on trial for killing babies born alive after failed abortion attempts.
It was the witnesses who were giving the most shocking evidence I'd ever heard. But the most shocking thing was behind me, because I looked behind and it was empty. There were no journalists.
McAleer quickly realized Gosnell was a national story, barely getting local media coverage. So he told his wife and fellow journalist Ann McElhaney they should look into it. McElhaney hesitated. She didn't think they should touch the pro-life cause.
As journalists, we always have a skeptical view of activists anyway. So we thought they were just activists being activists and exaggerating and trying to get a point across by overemphasizing something. And so let me tell you, we were wrong.
The pair spotted hypocrisy when an abortionist who is compliant with the law was put on the stand.
What happens if the baby is born alive? Because that was a big thing about Kermit Gosnell killing babies born alive. And she said, well, we would give it comfort care. And you could see all these journalists going, comfort care, what's that? And then she explained what comfort care was, that you put the baby aside, keep it warm, and it will die naturally. And it's like, so hold on, this guy's been charged with stabbing babies born alive, but it's legal in this country, in this state, to let a baby born alive die of neglect and dehydration.
Awoken to the abortion industry's deceit, McAleer and McElhaney took on an ambitious mission. They started a crowdfunding campaign to create a movie about Kermit Gosnell.
With your help, we're going to hire the best screenwriter, director, and actors to make sure that the story of Kermit Gosnell gets into every home in America.
The campaign raised more than $2 million, the most for a movie project in Indiegogo's history. The filmmakers plan to release the Gosnell movie as an independent theatrical release this fall because they're struggling to get a distributor.
Hollywood said it was too controversial for it, which is a complete joke because Hollywood releases pro-abortion movies all the time.
The married pair of investigative journalists also recently released a book, Gosnell, the untold story of America's most prolific serial killer.
The mainstream media have ignored the book altogether, completely, 100%. And the book went straight into Amazon bestsellers.
As with all his projects, McAleer is clear. He is not an activist. He is a journalist.
It's not my job to change the conversation, right? But it's my job that people have the truth.
That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. You can reach us anytime with questions, ideas, comments at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. God bless.